So I had this kid in youth group that was always breaking stuff. He came to youth group one night and he tried to run up a wall and do a flip off it. But instead of running up the wall, his foot went through the wall. And he had no way to fix it. He had no way to pay for it. So I had this great idea. I decided he was going to be my slave. So what I did was I had him come to the church every day after school to my office, and he'd wash my car, and he'd clean the youth room, and he would go and I'd send him and go buy me food and stuff, And it was great. And I thought I'd feel bad about it, in about a week, but I let a few weeks go by until I finally let him be set free of his slave to be my slave. And so tonight we're talking about a new concept. It's called atonement. And what that literally means, it means to be one with someone. It means to have a relationship with someone, or to be in a relationship with someone. And in this case, when Jesus went to the cross, he was making a relationship with God for us possible. That's atonement. So tonight we're going to look at the power of the cross and how that sets us free from the bondage in slavery of sin. From the bondage of slavery to sin. In John 8:34 it says, "Everyone who sins is a slave to sin." What this is saying is that we're all slaves to sin. The Bible says that every person is born a slave to sin. See, slavery in our history is a horrible, horrible thing. I'm sure you've all seen movies about slavery. I'm sure you've read books in school about slavery. But did you know that right now, today, there's 20 to 30 million slaves out there in the world, and most of those are children? Slavery is a horrible thing, and the Bible says that just when people force others into slavery to be their slaves, our sin makes us slaves. Our sin makes us slaves. In Romans 7, it says, "I am all too human, a slave to sin. I don't really understand myself, for what I want to do, what is right, but I do not do it. Instead, I do what I hate. I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. There is another power within me that is at war with my mind. This power makes me a slave to sin that is still within me. Oh, what a miserable person I am. Who will free me from this life that is dominated by sin and death?" Now I want you to think, how many of you can relate to this? I know it sounds a little confusing, but you're basically want to do good sometimes, but you don't do it. And then there's other times you just want to be bad. It's almost like this sin has this power over your mind and it controls you. And this is because sin makes us slaves. Now, I think a lot of people realize this. They may not call it sin. There's even I want to Imagine Dragons. You guys know this band? They're not a Christian band, but they allude to this in their song Demons. And it says, "Don't want to let you down, but I am hellbound. Look into my eyes. It's where my demons hide. Don't get too close. It's dark inside. It's where my demons hide. It's where my demons hide." See, we can't take the sin within us too lightly. We can't minimize our sin. We can't think that it's not a big deal, because it is. If we fully understand the depth of our sin, we would hate it. See, if we don't recognize the reality of our bondage to sin, then we're just going to stay a slave to it. Now imagine if you were in prison in this 100-foot tower, chained to the wall, and I came to rescue you. I climbed this tower, I beat up 100 guards, I jumped through the window, I came and you were chained to this wall, and I said, "Take my hand, I'm here to rescue you." And you looked at me and said, "Nah, I'm good. I'm getting kind of used to these chains. I've got kind of a comfy place to sit now. They feed me here. I don't want to go." You'd be crazy. You'd be crazy, right? But just like this, just like me risking my life to save you, Jesus didn't just risk his life to save you. He gave up his life to save you from the bondage and slavery of your sin. And the cross sets us free from our sin. Hebrews 2 says this, "Only by dying could he break the power of the devil who had the power of death. Only in this way could he set free all who have lived their lives as slaves to the fear of dying." See, when Jesus died on the cross, it was a crushing blow to sin and to the slaveholder that we call Satan in our lives. It was a crushing blow to him because the power of Jesus dying on the cross broke the chains of sin that Satan used to hold us down. Satan loves to use sin, loves to remind us of our sin and hold us down and make us feel horrible about ourselves. But our sin is leading us to spiritual death. It's leading us to separation from God. It's ultimately leading us to hell. And this is what Satan used to remind us of that. And we think we have no way of escaping it. But when God provided a way for us to escape our bondage of sin, this is what the atonement was. It was salvation through the cross. The fear of the sin holding us down forever was taken away, and our sin was forgiven. Now we no longer live in this fear because we know that if we put our faith in Jesus, we're no longer slaves to this sin, but we find freedom in Jesus Christ. See, we can live in freedom. In Romans 6, it says, "Don't you realize that you became the slave of whatever you choose to obey? You can be a slave to sin, which leads to death, or you can choose to obey God, which leads to righteous living. Thank God. Once you were slaves to sin, but now you wholeheartedly obey the teaching we have given you. Now you are free from your slavery to sin, and you have become slaves to righteous living." We can choose to obey God, or we can choose to live like a slave to sin. We can choose to have this whole new life of freedom, or we could choose to still be in this life of sin and let it control us. But we're not slaves to sin anymore. We're free. If you're a Christian, you've been set free from that slavery of sin through the death of Jesus Christ. But if you choose to obey those sinful desires that still tempt us all the time, it's like you're becoming a slave to sin all over again. And who wants that? John 8:36 says, "So if the Son sets you free, you are truly free." See, we don't have to live like a slavery to sin anymore. We don't have to do it. First, if you put your faith in Jesus Christ and experience this atonement, you will actually be provided a relationship with God through the death of Jesus Christ. Then we live this life of joy and this life of freedom from sin that only God can give. So make that choice tonight. Make the choice not to be a slave to sin anymore, but accept the fact that Jesus died for that sin, set you free from it in eternity, and can help free you from it right now as you live every day.